The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, this is John Richardson. Welcome to this short training video for group leaders at First Free. I hope to be sending out several of these over the next few months just to check in with everyone, encourage you, talk about some of the things that are really important for us in our group's ministry. Today I want to talk about a really important part of our groups, and that is how we're doing care. And one of the most important ministries and essential ministries in the whole care arena is that the ministry of listening, being able to actually hear someone, hear their pain, their ideas, their frustrations, their perspectives, their perplexity, their excitement, the emotional reaction that happens when we listen to someone, and the connection that's made, and the psychological benefit of actually listening well is just amazing for us, and the spiritual benefits of being able to build trust and build passport with people really pay off in the long run. So just talk about some basic principles of listening and caring. What are some of the ingredients of care in our ministry? What do we need to have in our groups in order for care to take place? First, we need listeners. We need leaders and participants who not only know how to, but are willing to listen. We're usually too quick to speak, too quick to say what we think, give answers, fix things. But we need to be listeners to hear people's stories. And then we need speakers. We need people who are going to share their hurts, their pains, their ambitions, their ideas, their questions with us. The story then is the content that a speaker shares, that someone shares when they share their story. And the story is not just the words that come out of their mouth, it's their history, their past, their brokenness, the lens that they view life through. The mode of communication is also important to mention. Words are usually a key mode of communication, but we would not listen well if we weren't also listening for body language, for pauses, for emotions, for facial expressions. Those kinds of nonverbals often speak as much or more than what the words are that are coming out of a person's mouth. We also have to weigh the relationship. Is this someone who's been in our group for a long time, or a person we know well and we've developed a lot of rapport, passport with them so that we can interact with them at a certain level? Or is this someone new to our group that we're just learning their story and building trust? We need to distinguish where that is. I think the most important ingredient of care and listening is actually recognizing and believing and living out the truth that the divine presence of God is real and active in every conversation that we have. Every group meeting we have, every class we have, every conversation we have with someone who's hurting, we understand that God is present and God is doing work in that person's life and in our lives and in our situation beyond what we could even understand or know. So with that set up as the context, how are we as leaders going to make space for care? Before we even talk about listening, we have to understand a very frequent reality in our lives, and that is our cups are usually too full. We come into our group meetings, we're ready to lead, but we've had a full week, we've got a lot of planning we've done, and oftentimes our cups are so full that if someone were to share something significant to us, we wouldn't have room for it anyway. What are some of the things that fill our cups? And by cup, I just mean our life in general. The troubles of life, and it could be large issues. Maybe you just received word you lost your job, or someone in their family is ill, or it could be a lot of small things. The car broke down, the washing machine broke down, and our kids got the cold, whatever. A bunch of small things could also add up to fill the cup in the troubles of life. Guilt is also something that fills the cup. It could be guilt for things we've done, guilt for things we haven't done, but we just feel false guilt for. Shame, just not measuring up. Those kinds of emotions can fill our cup and keep us from having room and space to listen to the people in our groups. Our own work pressure comes into play as well. What's going on at work, the stress that we have there, expectations that we have for ourselves, that we have for other people, expectations that other people have for us. Sometimes it's the expectation we think other people have for us, or we think God has for us, that fills our cup and keeps us from listening and caring. Other factors like health issues, the busy pace of life, worry in our life, temptation and sin, this all comes together, and maybe you could add 6 or 7 more in your own life that fill your cup at any given time, so that if someone actually came up to you after a group meeting and said, "Can I talk to you? I'm really going through some hard times right now." The true truth is our cups are so full, if we pour anything more in, it's just going to spill out. So the question that we have to ask then is, what can we do to make space in our cup? There are a lot of ways to make space in our cup. Some are common to most of us. You might have very specific things that you do to make space in your cup, but often we think of pray. We connect with God. It says in Philippians, the Lord is near. Philippians 4 says, the Lord is near. Then don't be anxious about anything, but in prayer and supplication with request, or make your request known to God, and the peace that passes understanding will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. So God's presence is the context for us to pray, and in that prayer actually unload the worries of our life to God, and God promises to replace it, not in a way that we understand it in our head. It's not a cognitive understanding, but it's an understanding deep in our souls that we're okay because we know God has this and we can be content. So prayer is one way that we empty our cup. Other ways, just breathing, meditating, slowing down, being in the moment, reading scripture, not to prepare for our lessons or prepare for our groups, but just to connect with God and see his face. Walking, exercising, just waiting is tied to breathing and meditating. Slowing down, we go way too fast in our lives. We need to slow down. Then talking to someone, processing with someone in appropriate ways. All these things come together, and you may have others, to empty our cup. Then we're ready to receive people's pain. We're ready to receive their questions, their story, their hurt. We're ready to hear their fear. We're ready to encounter their anxiety in life. All that which we couldn't do when our cups are full. But as leaders, we need to regularly be emptying our cup so that we can receive the pain and the story that other people have. That's all getting us ready for this ministry of listening. And that's what we want to talk about a little bit now. What is the ministry of listening? The first principle in the ministry of listening is that God is present. I'm going to repeat that over and over and over again. If we miss that, then we're going to be off track from the very beginning. But God is present. He knows more about this person's life. God is present. He knows more about the situation. He knows more about the results. He knows more about the path of suffering this person is going through. He knows more about his purposes. He has more compassion, more wisdom, more insight than any of us have. So we have to trust God's present, and he's making his voice heard in this conversation. Along with that is the really important step of not fixing. Many of us, and some of you know who you are, you're by nature a fixer. As soon as someone's talking about a problem or dilemma in life, you're thinking of 5 people they need to talk to who can help with that. You're thinking of a pathway of 3 steps they need to get through to fix it, 2 things they did that caused it that they need to stop doing, and immediately you get into that fix mode. That actually prevents us from doing what the most important part of the ministry of listening is, which is just being present with that person, not fixing them. Because if you fix their problems, and here's the real dilemma, you actually might have a good read on what they need to do. But if they do it just because you've told them that's what they need to do, they really haven't grown at all. They just have followed your instructions. If it goes wrong, it's your fault. But if it goes right, then they're just going to come back to you the next time and stay dependent upon you. So not fixing is really, really important. Avoid judgment. And by that, I don't mean that we don't make assessments of if someone smokes cigarettes for 30 years and they have lung cancer. Well, that's kind of a consequence. Of course, we have assessments of the situation, but by avoiding judgment, I mean avoid judging that person, avoid condemning that man or woman, avoid putting ourselves in a position that's above them in any way. I don't think that helps us in our listening. Listen to the story from his or her perspective. try to put their lens on and look at the situation. If you had their family issues, their physical impairments, their mental, emotional struggles, their brokenness, if you had their personality, maybe you could better see it from his or her perspective. That's really, really important. One way to test whether you're seeing it from their perspective is just to start your responses with these phrases: sounds like or seems like. That sets you up for a listening kind of empathic conversation. It sounds like everyone in your life is turning on you right now. Or it seems like there's just no place for you to go to get out of this problem. It reflects back in an appropriate and a respectful way what you're hearing, and then they can say, yes, you're right, no, you're wrong. It helps to build passport, plus it helps to confirm whether you're actually connecting with their story. Something really important to remember is that other than God, this person who you're listening to is the expert on his or her life. He or she knows more about their brokenness, their past, their ambitions. They have more of a read on the solutions than anyone else in life. Now, they might not be connected with them, but they have them in there. That's why it's important for us not to be the fixers, but to ask questions. In fact, I tell people when I do training for counselors that I want you to listen 90% of the time and ask questions 10% of the time. That leaves 0% for fixing. Listen and then ask questions that help that person turn the rock over in their own life and see things from a different perspective. Ask questions that helps that person to challenge their own assessment of the dilemma that they're in and to own their responsibility for it. So ask questions to help them turn that rock over and make that discovery. When we do that, they're going to own the plan, and it's going to be much more successful and effective. And then the last element of the ministry of listening that I want to mention is usefulness of silence. We do not do very well with silence in our culture. We want to fill every moment with sound. We want music playing. We want the TV on. We want people talking. We want podcasts to listen to. We need something going on. And if we're going to be good listeners, we have to be comfortable with silence. So if someone in your group is sharing a story, sharing something that's really heavy, don't feel like you have to jump right in with an answer or jump right in with words. Sometimes the best thing to say is, thank you for sharing that. That's very heavy. Can we all just be silent for a moment and kind of soak in the weight and the heaviness of this dilemma that this person's just shared with us? How do we create listening environments? This is important in our groups, that we create places in our groups where listening occurs in a healthy way. The first thing is for you to model good listening. And by that, as a leader, you're listening to the people in your class. When someone gives an answer to a question, you're not just shooting back your response. You're listening and maybe even reflecting back a couple times to make sure you're understanding it. In your small group or your Bible study, you're listening and letting people explain and explore why they're believing or thinking what they're thinking, and then you're reflecting back. So model good listening as a leader. Set ground rules for your group. If you're starting a group from your very first meeting, if you're in your group for a while, revisit this. What are some ground rules? We want this group, we want our class or our group to be a place where when people share their stories, we're not fixing it. We're not trying to fix their lives for them. Instead, we're trying to empathize, to enter into their story, to ask questions that will help that person turn that rock over in their own life and encounter God in a powerful way in their own story. Use words and phrases that value story. The whole Bible, I mean, isn't it interesting that the Bible wasn't given to us as a textbook? It's a narrative. It's a story with account after account of how the God of the universe interacts with people, broken people like us. And at that intersection of our brokenness and God's sovereign power, we find this incredible experience of transformation and change. Maybe even take some time in your group, set aside 10 minutes every group or every class meeting and say, we're going to start listening to people's stories. We're going to have people share, and we're going to practice listening, not fixing. At the end of this person's story, we're going to ask some questions to better understand, but we're not going to try to fix. We're going to ask questions that might probe, help them to explore issues in their lives and perspectives that they might not have seen, but we're not going to fix. Allow for silence, I've already mentioned that. Pause for prayer, not to fix things, but to hear from God. In your prayer, make sure that you're making prayer, explaining prayer in the context of hearing from God, not just sharing with God all of the concerns that we have or prayer requests that we have. Use reflective questions. I've already mentioned that, the importance of just reflecting back to people what they need to go, what they need to hear, but to reflect back to them something that's a reframing of what they've said so they would understand that you do hear and listen to them. And then let go of pressure to be precise and accurate in all things. I mean, we are in the area of relationships here. We're in the area of life. This is not precision. It's helping this person with the data that they have, which may be incomplete, to be able to walk a path of faith and trust God as they move forward, even if they don't have all of the answers. And then I've already talked about this, but it's worth repeating. Regularly empty your cup so that you can take on and listen to the needs and concerns of other people. The verse that I like to read when I talk about this is Isaiah 50 verses 4 and 5. The sovereign Lord has taught me what to say so that I can strengthen the weary. Every morning he makes me eager to hear what he is going to teach me. The Lord has given me understanding, and I have not rebelled or turned away from him. I love that. The Lord has taught me what to say, not so I can fix or so I can be the authority on something, but so that I can strengthen the weary, tired people in my life, so I can strengthen people who need that strength. And every morning he makes me eager to hear what he is going to teach me. And I pray for you as a group leader that that's what's going on in your life, that every morning you're eager to hear what God is going to teach you so that you can listen and strengthen the lives of the people who are in your group. A few resources that I want to share with you that might help in this area. If you want to go to CCEF, which is the Christian Counseling and Education Foundation website, ccef.org, they have a whole list of resources, podcast, articles on a lot of different counseling related matters and care matters, but they do have some specifically for listening. And then I like some of the Mind Tools stuff that's on the internet. So if you go to mindtools.com or Google Mind Tools Listening, you'll come up with this active listening article that they have, which has some really good practical tips. And there's a really good blog on desiringgod.org, 6 lessons in good listening from a very biblical Christian perspective, talks about listening. So thanks a lot for tuning in here today. I pray for you regularly and trust that God is blessing you as you care for the people in your group, and hope that in the days and weeks to come, this listening is going to be a vital ministry for you as you build disciples. Have a good day.